to stay awake. Oh, hi. How's it going? So, back to the reviews. Sorry this one's late, by the way. I got a little bit busy yesterday and just got sidetracked and didn't get around to it. So, the Nightmare 6 review, Freddy's Dead, is going to be a little later tonight as well. So we're going to get all caught up today. Alrighty, so in Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. This is another one that fans seem to be really divided on. Some love it, some hate it passionately. And, well, let's see what I think about it today on the Multimedia Chronicles. Welcome back. Alright, so Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child, basically wraps up the Nightmare on Elm Street trilogy of movies that began with number 3, Dream Warriors, carried on through number 4, The Dream Master, and then concludes in The Dream Child. So it picks up a little while after the events of Nightmare 4. Freddy is long gone. So it actually begins with kind of a surreal scene of two people making love.
Both body doubles, by the way.
Yes, while the opening credits play. And we quickly learn that it's actually Alice and Dan. Yes, they're now officially an item. They've been together for a while. They're very happy. And much like how her arc ended at the end of Nightmare 4, Alice it's a whole new chapter in Alice's life. She's very sure of herself now, very confident, and quickly learns that she's pregnant. She's going to have a baby. So her and Dan are very excited about that and couldn't be happier. However, the nightmares have started again. She begins to have strange dreams of this nun, this woman, who, of course, we learn is Amanda Krueger. Yes, Amanda Krueger is back. And we get more flashbacks to the origins of Freddy, basically that horrible night, or I guess holiday stretch, where Amanda Krueger was locked in the tower of the criminally insane and was repeatedly violated until she was released after Christmas, and she was found after Christmas and was pregnant, and well, we know that whole story. Well, we see it from a slightly different perspective this time. We actually see it from Amanda's perspective. And by the way, keep a sharp eye out for a not-so-subtle cameo appearance of Robert Englund as one of the 100 Maniacs. It's not subtle at all. He basically walks right up to the camera, looks right at you, and then keeps looking at you as he walks off and disappears into the crowd of maniacs. But nice little, bit of fun there for sharp-eyed viewers. Or for those, 2 or 3 of you who may not know what he looks like outside of the Freddy makeup. So at first, Alice is basically just having these kind of strange dreams of, this nun that she doesn't know and her horrible experiences. But then also her friends start having nightmares as well, involving Freddy. And needless to say, Freddy is quite pissed off with Alice, given the way she defeated him and the fact that he lost all of the souls that he had spent how many years collecting, thanks to her defeating him. So he's very weak, and he's trying to get back into our world, get back into everybody's dreams, get back into Alice's dreams to destroy her. So how he gets to her is he's going through the dreams of her unborn child, basically using the purity of the child to invade her dreams and grow her strength. And he's also trying to influence the child to kind of team up with him and say, oh, your mother doesn't really want you, and she doesn't really want the baby, and you were an accident, and blah, 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 and you should hang out with me, I'll be your friend, that sort of thing. We don't actually see this happening. We kind of hear it third hand through actually through the unborn child in the form of Jacob, who is a little boy that keeps appearing in Alice's dreams and talking to her. And she asks him, "Well, what's your name?" She says, "Oh, my name's Jacob." And she's like, "Oh, well, that's interesting. I was thinking of naming my child that if he was a little boy." And he just kind of doesn't answer. But it turns out that this is her unborn child. I mean, you figured that out immediately. I mean, that's no big secret. It's like, yep, that's probably her kid. So it basically becomes the story of Freddy trying to rebirth himself through the dreams of the child, but also of Alice trying to keep her child away from Freddy. And then on top of that, as Freddy is getting more powerful and getting into our world, we go back to the Amanda Krueger dream, and he actually dreams himself being born. So he literally is reborn into the dream world via a flashback dream of his mother giving birth to him. Now, in this nightmare version, she gives birth to like a baby Freddy, like a baby like burned dream demon Freddy, and the practical effects on that, by the way, are really cool, of the little baby evil Freddy. And so then he is reborn and he grows, and we have the famous line, "It's a boy," as he's sang at the church. I gotta say, like, the look of this one it's been described as the gothic Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and it very much is. I mean, in terms of the set design and the sort of the tone of the story, there's a lot of like really old sort of gothic architecture and that style of set design in this. It really is a fantastic looking movie. Also tonally, it's much darker than its predecessor. Nightmare 4, for example, had a lot of sequences out in the day. Like there was the whole scene on the beach, which I completely forgot to mention in my review, with the Freddy shark claws and Kristen on the beach and such, and Freddy wearing shades. It's been described, I think, by Robert Englund as the MTV Nightmare movie, because it was all so bright and colorful and big production value and stuff. And actually, another scene I forgot to mention in Nightmare 4 was the scene that takes place in the diner, where he takes Alice appears in this diner, and then the waitress is actually her as an old lady, and he's trying to say, like, this is all you'll ever amount to, and then she brings out the pizza with the little heads of all her dead friends. And another great little crazy scene. But so anyway, back to Nightmare 5. So after Freddy is reborn, he begins plaguing the dreams of her friends, and as one would expect, systematically killing them. So there's sort of three main death sequences or nightmare sequences in this. There's David, who is a friend of hers who's kind of a comic book nerd and also a comic book artist. He's working on his own stuff, and we have the old flipping through the comic and seeing the story of the movie up until that scene, and then who knows what happens, and then it sort of continues from there. A classic trope that I've always enjoyed, and it's one that we've seen actually a couple of times in the Nightmare franchise, probably most notably being New Nightmare, which of course we'll talk about when we get to it. So in his dream, he also has a fear of blood. Actually, he literally faints at the sight of blood, even if it's just a freaking paper cut or something. He has one dream, I think, where he almost gets killed, but he gets away. But then there's the one where he actually does get killed, where he's just kind of cornered alone by Freddy, and he becomes his own superhero character. He's like this sort of almost Punisher type with like a hood, and he's like the Hooded Avenger or something like that. So he is basically just blasting away at Freddy with machine guns and stuff and laughing merrily as he's laying waste to him. But then Freddy becomes a comic book superhero himself. And of course, because, Freddy has total control over the dream world. I mean, this time he's fully recovered his strength because he's been reborn. So he becomes Super Freddy, which is just basically this big, muscular, beefy version of Freddy, and just annihilates him. Now, really cool effects in this, I gotta say. It was kind of reminiscent of that Take On Me music video where you had sort of the black and white sketch style animation, and then mixed with the live action. So in this case, he gets, he initially gets sucked into the comic book. He gets turned into a drawing and sucked into the comic book, and then becomes real when he becomes the superhero. But then after he becomes, as Freddy is slashing away at him, he's a drawing again. He's like a drawing of himself, and Freddy's just like slashing at the air, slashing the paper, and such. So I thought that was a really creative way to do it. Rather than go for just the blood and guts and gore, they took a more creative approach. And then eventually he slices his head off, and you just see the animated head go floating away, and it's just shredded paper everywhere. So one of the other death scenes, well, there's a couple of pretty spectacular ones actually. One of which was basically Dan. So sadly, Dan does not survive this one, but boy, did he ever get a good death scene. It's basically the one where he's on his way to Alice. He's trying to get back to her, and he falls asleep at the wheel, and then of course Freddy just doesn't miss a beat, gets right into his dream right away, and dreams that the truck runs out of gas, and then he goes to the diner, he can't find her, so then he sees a motorcycle, so he grabs the motorcycle and just takes off. And as he's going through the bombing down the highway, the motorcycle kind of turns into Freddy, and then all these pipes and wires and cables start coming out and start like shoving into his face and his arms and his legs, and he's literally physically fusing with the motorcycle and becoming the motorcycle. And it's quite a gruesome scene, but also fantastically well done. I mean, it's just jaw-dropping practical effects for this sequence. I mean, they really... I remember when I saw some interviews and just brief behind-the-scenes stuff about the movie when it was coming out, and when I heard that they were doing this motorcycle sequence, I was just like, how the hell are they even going to do that? Like, how is that going to work or look even remotely convincing? But then when I saw it, I was just like, wow, that actually looks amazing. Like, I can't believe what a good job they did with that. So now I should I'll mention something about that in a little bit, actually. So anyway, it's a really spectacular sequence, and I gotta say, when he's in full like it's kind of reminiscent of H.R. Giger, like the whole biomechanical thing. Like, he turns into this biomechanical fusion of man and machine, and he's just bombing down the highway. And then, of course, as he's waking up, he's actually still at the wheel of the truck, and he wakes up just in time. Bam! Head-on collision with another truck, and then that's how he actually dies. And then I got to say, also really interesting. So at the time, Alice is working at the diner, and she gets this flash of Dan's death, where it's just like the whole background blows out, and you just see Dan like screaming as he's getting dragged into the pit of hell, the Freddy tunnel. And so maybe, I mean, that could be him being dragged to hell, or more likely being dragged to Freddy to have his soul captured by Freddy. So, but really spectacular. And it throws you off, too, because it doesn't look like anything. It just looks like Alice at the diner. You think, oh, she'll probably get a phone call or something. But then suddenly the whole background just disappears, and it's Dan being pulled into the tunnel. I mean, it really throws you for a loop. Like, you do not see that coming. But quite spectacular. So then the other sort of big notable death scene was of her friend Greta. And her friend Greta, her mom is all about modeling and looking good and being skinny. So Greta is basically bulimic, just through pressure of her mother. Just doesn't eat very much. She's trying to keep very slim and such because her mom wants her to be a model. She's very beautiful. And she just hates it. I mean, she just hates it. She just does not want it. She just wants to go and eat cheeseburgers or whatever, but it's like her mom keeps forcing her and pressuring her into this. So in her dream, she's at a dinner, and she's actually at this dinner as well. She basically, I guess she falls asleep at the dinner table because she's just so freaking tired from not eating. And so Freddy shows up and proceeds to essentially force feed her to death. Like, to the point where her cheeks are all puffed out and strained, and like she's all bloated and everything. And in the real world, it looks like she just chokes to death on a piece of food and then collapses on the table. Now, I have to say something about those two last dream sequences. The MPAA, I mentioned this in the comic book overview that I did of the early Freddy comics yesterday. And the MPAA really came down like a ton of bricks on this particular movie, like far more so than they did with the previous movies. And it's kind of funny because these particular death scenes, while horrifying, were not particularly gory or bloody. They are to some extent, but I mean in a much more creative way rather than just being exploitative per se. It's not like the first one where it's just plain and simple slashes with the razor claws, or the third one where you have things like the guy's veins getting ripped out of his arms and legs and stuff like that. It's much less graphic and much more creative in Nightmare 5, which is why it surprised me that they were being so hard on it and saying, no, basically you got to cut it down. You got to cut it down, or we're going to give you an X rating. We're going to give you an X rating. You got to cut it down. Apparently, they sent it back to the MPAA 20 times, making trims here, trims there. It's like, okay, is it good now? Okay, is it good now? And Wes Craven has said in interviews, and actually some of the other crew as well, like editors and whatnot, that it was really frustrating dealing with the MPAA because they wouldn't always give you notes. They would just say, oh no, it's got to be cut down. It's like, well, what specifically do you have a problem with? So they basically just took a wild guess. It's like, okay, but maybe this scene, maybe that scene, and just trimmed and trimmed and trimmed, and ended up cutting out, I don't know, about a minute or two of material, specifically from Greta's death scene and Dan's death scene. So they cut out quite a bit of stuff from that. So in Dan's death scene, for example, there's more shots of the the sharp tubes and such of the motorcycle jabbing into him and injecting him with fuel or whatever. There's more scenes of his face kind of racked in pain as the wires and tubes are working their way through him. There's also a shot where his face literally just gets ripped right off, and then you just see the skull underneath. So that was trimmed way, way down. I mean, you still get the general gist of it, the general sense of it, but you don't see the actual, penetration of most of the tubes and whatnot. You see some of them, like when they're already in the skin, kind of working their way deeper, but most of it is like the really sort of shock moments from that have been cut right out of the theatrical version. And then Greta's death. Greta's death is the one that I think suffers the most because the whole irony of her death. I mean, Freddy's always been about ironic deaths, right? So the whole irony of her death is lost completely in the theatrical version because in the original uncut version, now Freddy says this in both versions. He says, "You are what you eat," okay? And that was the whole kind of kicker of that death scene was, "You are what you eat." And let me explain why. Because in the original uncut version, first off, he shows the little doll of her. And in the uncut version, he actually slices the doll. And you see, like, blood coming out of the doll. And then, the two claws, he turns into a spoon. And he's, like, spoon-feeding her food. And, like, just force-feeding her. In the theatrical version, it just looks like he force-feeds her to death. In the uncut version, the camera actually pulls back. And you realize that he's not just feeding her food. He's actually feeding her own insides. So he's actually cut open her stomach and he's scooping out her own guts and feeding it to her. So literally, you are what you eat. I mean, that is a far more ironic. And later on, when you see kind of the ghost forms of them in Alice's dream during the final confrontation with Freddy, you see Greta with her stomach all bloody. And in the theatrical version, that makes no sense. Like, why is her stomach all bloody? And you think, well, maybe she just exploded from eating too much. But no, when you've seen the uncut version, it's like, oh, that's why. So, now how do I know this? Well, they actually did release the uncut version, but only on VHS and Laserdisc. Yeah. The DVD and Blu-ray editions, none of them have the uncut version. It's all the MPAA cut. That was released theatrically, so it's unfortunate. The story that we've heard is that there's some kind of issue with the film masters. Either they've lost them or they're in rough condition or something. Whatever the case may be, they just have not been able to restore the uncut version for modern releases. Now, if you poke around, I know on YouTube they actually do have, there's been a few people who put up VHS clips, like clips from the VHS release of those two death scenes, so you can see them uncut. The quality's really, really rough, though. But, I mean, you can still get the gist of it and get what's going on. But it's really a shame that happened. I'm really kicking myself, actually, also because I used to have the Laserdisc. I had no idea that the uncut version was so rare. I just assumed, like, home video, they always give you the uncut. Get out of my face. Just some kind of bug. They always give you the uncut version, right? That's kind of the whole point of home video, is to see what wasn't allowed in the theater or what have you. To have it complete and uncut. I mean, the uncut version, it's not like an extended version that they just did for home video. No, that was the original cut. That was the intended cut. That was the one that the filmmakers wanted us to see. And the MPAA just messed it up for everybody. So that really, really sucks. Because those two death scenes in particular, I mean, the one with Dan was just so spectacular and creative. I mean, I think it stands out as one of the all-time great death scenes in the entire Nightmare franchise. I mean, it's just so cool. Like, just the way they did it. I mean, it's really quite amazing how well done that is. And then the one with Greta, I mean, that is the ultimate irony. Someone who is bulimic and, refuses to eat, being force-fed her own insides. I mean, that is a beautiful Freddy ironic moment, and it's a shame that has now been lost, possibly forever. So anyway, long and the short of it is, Alice defeats Freddy yet again, and this time actually with the help of Amanda Krueger. So Amanda Krueger, her ghost, actually goes into the dream with Alice, and together they're able to defeat Freddy. So it kind of ends with this touching motherly moment where Alice takes her baby in the form of Jacob into her womb. And then, just a little glow of love there. And she's all like, like all nice and happy. And then Amanda Krueger does the same with Freddy, taking him back into her. And she's just like, ow, and just kind of hobbles away. It's like, yes, I'm sure that is not comfortable at all. But I don't know, a lot of people don't like this one. And honestly, I don't know why. I don't know what the big issue is that they have with it. There are certain aspects of it maybe stretch believability a little bit, especially after how final his Freddy's defeat was at the end of number 4. But I mean, the thing is, I don't think that number 5 is irredeemable at all. I mean, the thing that really impressed me about it was just how creative it was. I mean, it was trying to kind of rein things in more and make Freddy dark again. And I think they get an A for effort for that, because they actually took it in some really interesting directions. I mean, we got to see the origin story of Freddy from a different perspective, more from Amanda's side. I mean, in Nightmare 3, we heard the story as told by the older Amanda, but in this one, we actually get to experience it to some extent through her eyes. And I mean, in the dream, it's kind of Alice as Amanda, but yeah, I mean, it just made it even more horrifying. But I liked that aspect of it, the fact that they were going for a darker Nightmare on Elm Street again, because I mean, as it should be. I think it should be darker. I mean, it's fine to have the Freddy's wisecracks and whatnot in there, but the overall tone, I've always felt, works better when it's dark and scary. Like the first one was really dark and really scary. The third one was really dark and scary. We had a bit of the wisecracks in there, but it still had an edge to it. It still had bite to it, The fourth one, don't get me wrong, I think the fourth one is a lot of fun, and I really enjoy it a lot. I think, again, it has some incredibly creative nightmare sequences, and it's a lot of fun. But it's a lot more lighthearted. Like I said at the time, when I took my friend to see it, who'd never seen a Nightmare on Elm Street movie, he said it wasn't scary, it was more funny. And that was not the experience I was expecting him to have or wanting him to have. But he was right. He was absolutely right. It is not a very scary movie. The fifth one, I think they, were getting things back on track, and it was getting scary again. but I guess it didn't do as well as the other ones because the series was put to rest for a few years, and it wasn't until what was it 1991, 92, I guess we got. I guess 92, we got Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which basically said to me, I was like, okay, they're doing one more, and then that's it. They're killing it for good. So, but I didn't believe that anyway. I mean, well, we heard that with Friday the 13th, The Final Chapter, and then we had The New Beginning. Like, come on. Nobody ever stays dead in the horror world. Anyway, yeah, so overall, I enjoy Nightmare 5. I actually did not see it in the theater. I wanted to see it in the theater, but the summer of 1989 for me was all about Batman. All my spare money was going into all things Batman, so Batman was literally the only movie I went to see in the theater, and I actually went to see it 3 times. So I guess I could have gone to see it twice and saw Nightmare 5 one of those times, but I didn't. Instead, I chose to just keep going to see Batman over and over again. And summer of '89 was a great summer for movies, just generally. We had Nightmare 5, we had Star Trek 5, which is not the greatest one, but hey, it was a Star Trek movie. We had Ghostbusters 2, and then of course Batman. Just a great year for movies. Alrighty, well that is it for Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. Hope you enjoyed. Feel free to agree or disagree. Leave your comments down below or wherever YouTube is putting the comment box nowadays. I know they change it up sometimes. The title used to be up there. Now it's down there. I don't know. I can't. That's why I never point like, go here to click on this thing, because who knows where it's going to be next week. So quick thank you to my Patreon sponsors, especially Kyle Pellegrini and Get Your Gorgeous On, the always wonderful e-mag maintained by Michelle O'Toole and Simon Hedger. And I will see you guys a little later today, probably tonight, for my review of Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. We'll see you then. Until then, chocolate bar. Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. Well, you know what? It's gotta be a Baby Ruth. It's just gotta be. It's gotta be. Alright. Hold on. There we go. These are kind of like Snickers, but they're not. They're Baby Ruth. See you next time, folks. Sayonara.